Everybody, what's up? A lot of stuff happening in Florida State land. This is X's and Knowles presented by Knowles 24/7. I'm Trey Rowland. That's Adam Brown. That's Kevin Little. And today we're going to be going over the film for Notre Dame versus No We're Not. They lost by a bajillion points. There's more interesting stuff to talk about because Mike Norvell let go his defensive coordinator, his offensive coordinator, and his wide receivers coach on Sunday. So we thought what we would do is actually get to talk about something interesting for the first time in film analysis in the past couple of weeks. And we're going to take a look at the first crop of names that have been associated with Florida State's open defensive coordinator position. As Adam Fuller is moving on to a different assignment. There's a lot of names that have been tied to this open position. Mike Norvell said in his press conference that a lot of these positions are getting tremendous interest, which is quite the adjective, and I believe him. So we're going to talk about some names. We're going to go over film. Kev's got some stats. Adam's got some film. Join us live. Tell all your friends, and we'll get you hyped up, kind of take a look at these candidates and see what they do. Just take a 30,000-foot view. Once we start to get some more intel, we can do some deep dives. That's right. Christopher Counts is the first one here in the chat. Who's going to be number 2? I don't know. Come on in. Let's go, guys. Anything you want to say in general or just right to the film and stats? Let's talk some names.
Yeah, I want to get to this. No, absolutely friggin' not.
No, I don't believe that's an option. So there you go. Anyway, so the first real candidate in our opinion, and I guess too, if you guys want to, as we're talking, or I don't know if you want to wait till the end, like, do you guys have a preference of one of these names? You can save it to the end, but do you have?
Yeah, let's wait. Maybe wait till the end till we've gone through it.
Okay,
here's an interesting one. Before we get into it, I think this is an interesting question. You kind of said, well,
okay,
maybe talk a little bit before. From Matt V, what are the most important priorities in your opinions? Coaching ability, recruiting prowess, ability to bring players with them, etc. I'm curious your guys' thoughts.
I think it's recruiting. It really is. Now he can't be like a dud as a coach because Mike Norvell is an offensive guy and he really lets his defensive coordinator run the defense. He's got to have organizational ability. He does have to have a baseline level as a good coach. But we've seen, and I said this on the podcast with Chris a couple days ago, the defense in modern college football, with how the rules are skewed in the offense's favor, I really think that athletes are a paramount. And you saw same defensive coordinator, Adam Fuller, from 2024 to 2023. You take away 7 to 8 NFL draft picks, they're doing the same thing. The results are drastically different. So I am talent acquisition, recruiting.
I'm gonna buck the trend. I think that the second most important position, coaching position wise, is the coordinator opposite of the head coach. So if I've got Mike Norvell as my offensive head coach, I'm really going to prioritize getting someone who can put together a competent scheme, can kind of organize that side of the ball. Yes, recruiting is necessary. Yes, recruiting is helpful. You can't, I don't think you want to get someone who's as much of a detriment in that category as it seemed like Coach Fuller was. But no, I want to see someone who's a little creative. I want to see someone who's kind of following the trends of modern college football, that's kind of doing things that is going to put the players in a position to succeed. And then hopefully you can surround him with people who can recruit. But yeah, at least defensive coordinator wise, I'm okay going out and getting someone who's might be a little bit less of a recruiter and someone who might be a little bit more of a schemer. Whereas offensive coordinator wise, I might feel a little bit different.
That's fair.
I tend to agree. I think you want to get an elite X's and O's person. I think more importantly, maybe one that wasn't discussed there. They've got to get somebody in that spot that is going to be more relatable to the modern football player than what I think Adam Fuller was all the time. I know there's a lot of conversation out there about, when Randy Shannon was elevated to a co-DC about, maybe bridging some of the gap between Adam Fuller and some of the players in that voice. So I think that my thoughts are I want to get a guy that is an elite X's and O's person, somebody that can relate to the modern football player and can get their message across, because they're going to be the head coach of the defense. But you can't be a negative on the recruiting trail, which is what Adam Fuller was by all accounts. If you've listened to if you believe what Zack and Brendan and Chris have said in some of the more recent conversations they've had about Adam Fuller. So need to be able to recruit, can't be a negative, but I think I lean more towards like being strong in the X's and O's portion of it.
And to be fair, this is Florida State. There are some teams that don't have to choose. Maybe just get a guy that's good at all the stuff.
Yeah,
that'd be nice, and pay him a lot of money. So that's an option too. But we'll keep that in mind, and maybe we'll kind of, as we're looking at each of these candidates, we'll kind of look at them through the lens of, are they a good all-arounder? Do they specialize in one area over the other? Where could there be some weaknesses, et cetera, et cetera? All right, you guys ready to get to the first candidate or the first name that's been associated with this opening? First one is Scott Simmons. He's the SMU defensive coordinator. He's been the SMU defensive coordinator, I think, since 2002. They're ranked in the top 10 the past 2 years in yards per play, and he's a guy who has ties with Norvell, working on his staff. He was hired by Mike in 2018. He worked at Memphis as a linebackers coach, also worked in the region before. Thank you, Brendan Sonnone, for your article where I'm getting a lot of this information. Worked as the DC at West Georgia, so he's got some Southeastern ties. Looks like we're watching SMU versus Oklahoma here.
Yeah, it's going to be from the Oklahoma offensive perspective, but we're going to be able to see the overhead view, the all-22 view here. And
what year is this from, Adam?
This is from last year, so this is 2023.
Okay.
Yeah, so based off just a general look at the stats, and I'm sure we'll see some of this play out. They're about 50-50, 3 down, 4 down. They kind of play both. You can see. I mean, I would call this an even front here. So you've got four down linemen.
Looks like they've got a rover or hybrid player here.
Yep. And then they're not super blitz heavy, 107th in the country this year on blitzes. But what you will see more often than not is a safety in the middle of the field. So they're going to play a lot of cover 3. This is a very, very zone heavy scheme in his time at SMU. Not a ton of man coverage, so a little bit different than what you saw at Adam Fuller, where everything was either zone or either man or some sort of match man.
I'm gonna let it play here so we can see it from above.
Yeah, so you can see they're playing zone at the bottom of the field here.
Anything that stuck out when we played them that they did to us on the defensive side of the ball, guys?
I mean, they just generally. I mean, if you pause it right here, AB.
Yeah, sorry.
They're gonna keep that one safety back, move that rover into the box, and kind of just keep numbers, keep run numbers. They're gonna make it harder to run the football. They're gonna challenge you to make the tough throws up the seams, and I mean that's gonna be pretty common for a lot of the cover 3 teams that we'll be looking at. And that's what they did against FSU. They just took away the run, and it was that easy.
Has been for a lot of teams this year.
Sorry, I'm just reading something here. Trying to find his history of where he's been throughout his career.
Like I said, he was linebackers with Memphis, hired by Mike in 2018. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure of the trajectory since then. What are you seeing here, Kev? More of the same?
Yeah, they went to little man coverage on that 3rd down, and this was a pretty decent Oklahoma offense. But here, that's something you like to see. That's something you don't see that often out of FSU's secondary. That nickel really triggering down fast. So you can see that they're a little bit okay with you taking a shot behind them, right? Every time you see that kind of safety, that secondary player being that aggressive towards a screen or towards a run, they're setting themselves up for a big play, which is
not big cushions like we've seen a lot from FSU, right? What is it? Do they give up a lot of explosives typically?
Let's take a look.
Because right now it looks like aggressive, a lot of movement from the defensive line. They're flying to the ball. It looks nice to watch from here, especially what's 2023 Oklahoma. This is with Dylan Gabriel, right?
Mm-hmm.
This year's SMU team has not given up explosives or really success rate, so that they've been a pretty solid unit top to bottom.
Interesting. What are we doing here?
Adam, did you get a chance to look at his history before at SMU?
It's No, it's not very clear. There's not a great one out there. Well, I'm sorry about this.
No, you're fine. Okay,
Get
so
it
not a
wrong.
lot of explosives, really good in yards per play.
Yeah, I mean the defense has just been really solid, top to bottom. They don't force a lot of tackles for loss. I mean they're not a huge blitzing team, but they're just solid. They're gonna keep you from that kind of 5 to 10 yard range. Whereas kind of Fuller was the opposite. He was either bringing all pressure or really dropping back. And so I think this is he's kind of the antithesis of what Adam Fuller was doing in terms of you're seeing a lot more zone, you're seeing a lot more cover 3, and you're seeing kind of a team that's not going to blitz a lot, but is going to try to stop the run through just adding a number to the box.
And I like that. So we've seen some pressures. We saw a nickel and a Mike pressure already. We've seen safeties getting down in the box and fitting where they're supposed to fit, which we've here's the nickel Mike pressure there with a zone look behind it. We've seen safeties fit the box where they're supposed to fit, and we know that that's been a weakness for Florida State and the reason why they've been unsuccessful against the run game at times, or leaky against the run game at times, because they're so slow, because they've always been so concerned about giving up explosive pass plays. There's an odd look for you, Kev.
I think you might have hopped off or something, Adam. But yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So you see a little bit of some variation in the look right here.
Yeah,
Explain that
you
for
see
people.
them jump into an odd look here.
Seems like there's a lot of movement on that defensive line. They're really trying to
Yeah.
get some looks, cause some confusion. Whereas
So
Florida
see, they're lined up over the guards here. They're
Mhm.
presenting an even front, and they shift late. They give you a nose. They give you a 5 tech up top there, inside of the tackle.
And Florida State's defense, to my knowledge, Adam, doesn't do a lot of this. I mean, they play a lot of games with their defensive line, like a lot of stunts and twists and everything like that, but not a lot of like stimming and like late stimming. Does that seem to be kind of like the new
No,
trend?
it's line up. Here we are. We're going
Yeah.
to try to out athlete you, and this, it's a more of a passive bend but don't break mindset. And this one is more of attack you. Which is something Adam Fuller always talked about, is wanting to play offense with his defense, and never really came to fruition in his time here. But it looks like that's the goal here for SMU and for Scott Simons.
Yeah, and the defense plays a lot like their offense, dude. Aggressive, fast. Like they're gonna try to create and cause havoc. So I really like what I'm seeing. It seems like this would fit the mold of what you guys were talking about. And that's tough. They get in trouble there.
There you go. There? I mean, but that's what you get when you're not playing too high safeties and you're being aggressive, right? You're going to give up. You get a little bit of a trick type of play here out of Oklahoma, and you give up a shot play. But I can't remember if we've talked about it or it's been discussed quite a bit. Like, that's one of those things. Okay, your mindset is SMU. You've got an elite offense. Let's get the ball back to the offense and score points. You're going out here thinking that you're not going to give up this every time that you are on defense, that you're going to get a stop or you're going to get a turnover or whatever, a takeaway. Let's get the ball back to our offense and try to get it back as quickly as we can. So this aggression matches what they want to be offensively, and it's not been the case with what Florida State's tried to do defensively. They've been very passive, allow the opposing offense to kind of hold the ball and control the game flow, and it's just never really kind of matched with what you wanted to be offensively.
No.
So this style matches more of what you want to be today in modern football.
I agree with that. Anything else you want to add before we move on to the next candidate? Like I said, once we start getting some more intel, we can do more deep dives. But this is a promising candidate for me. Just watching the film, I like the way they play. It's clear you can feel the difference and definitely see the difference. Anything else you guys want to add before we move on?
Yeah, I wouldn't get too worked up in zone versus man versus all this stuff. I mean, it's just a different vibe. They ran more zone when they first got here. They stopped doing it because they were getting torn apart by RPO. So like it's not that they were incapable of running zone with Fuller, but it's just a different look, and I think it's one that maybe you can get your guys to play a little bit faster because they're guessing a little bit less on their stuff.
There you go. Next candidate, we're looking at Chris Hampton, who right now he's the Oregon co-defensive coordinator and the defensive backs coach. This is his first year, I believe, on Dan Lanning's staff. He was the DC at Tulane, so he does have DC experience. He led a top 25 to 35 scoring defense in yards per play when he was at Tulane. Played college football at South Carolina, got Southeastern ties. He's coached at McNeese State, Duke, Georgia Tech, Central Arkansas. Oh, Mike played at Central Arkansas, so he knows. He definitely knows the area. He's been like when we were talking about recruiters, this is kind of, I think, the guy that people, when the archetype, this seems to be the candidate that they circle. He's led a lot of really high profile blue chip recruitments for defensive backs in Oregon. And right now, Oregon, top 10 pass defense in the country. And he is leading the back half of that defense. So what do you guys see here from Chris Hampton?
So this is Ohio State versus Oregon, which is obviously a pretty high profile game, and look, Hampton's a tough one to necessarily speak on because
there's some risk here, right? I mean, Dan Lanning, defensive coordinator.
You've got co-DCs, plus you've got Dan Lanning, who's a defensive minded head coach. What is Chris Hampton's role truly? Is that just a pay raise? There's a lot there that there's a lot there. There's a lot of questions there, a lot of question marks. And Mike's going to talk to Dan Lanning, and Dan Lanning is going to tell him, like, this guy's legit, or, maybe be careful. This may not be the move for you.
Now, Florida State in the past, hiring a strictly defensive backs only coach from a really highly respected program and giving him the chance to be DC has worked for them in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Worked for that 2013 team when they did with Jeremy Pruitt. So it's not unheard of, but like you said, it isn't as much of a sure thing as people with multiple years of, well, he does have defensive coordinator experience, right? No, yeah, he does. So he does have some, but not at the P4 level.
Right.
So that is encouraging.
Not at this level, with this caliber of a team. You're seeing a lot of odd front. Kev, I don't know if you've got the stats yet or not.
Yeah, they do a little bit of both. They're primarily a 2-high team. Yeah, and to play devil's advocate about his background, I mean, that doesn't sound terribly dissimilar, from what Lanning was himself. I mean, he was at Georgia as a defensive coordinator, which means that he wasn't really the true defensive coordinator. And I mean, he had experience at Memphis, but look at him now. But yeah, we're seeing more odd front, but here they shift even. They're pretty multiple, but they're going to base out of kind of 2-high, and I think they play a little bit more match. This is more schematically similar to kind of what you were ideally getting out of an Adam Fuller, with trying to play different fronts, trying to mix up man and zone coverages, but.
And what do you guys see out of the secondary specifically, technique-wise, how they're playing? They had about the toughest assignment in the country that you could have covering Ohio State's wide receivers this game. What do you guys see from their play, since that is what Hampton is completely engrossed himself in right now in this defense?
Yeah, I mean, they've been tight throughout the game. They've got elite caliber athletes out there. I mean, Hampton's a guy who we talked about, Trey, you specifically mentioned you want a recruiter. I mean, this is a guy who's won some big battles at Oregon. So he's going to go get you the talent you're looking for. These guys all know how to teach technique. They all know how to teach communication. They wouldn't be at this level if they didn't. So those things don't concern me. They're going to be able to backpedal. They're going to be able to zone shuffle. They're going to be able to speed turn, zone turn, all those different things. They're going to be able to play off man. They're going to be able to play press man. Here's a good look at it. I mean, look at that. Look how tight that is down the field.
Yeah, that's
turned into a pick.
Oh, pick. Yeah. What I like is that I know he's a secondary guy, but I like that they're playing a lot of tight front. They're mixing that in. That's the kind of 3-down look where the defensive ends are pinched inside. I think that's just where modern football is right now.
Kev, look up it. So he was at Tulane from 2001 to 2022.
2022 to 2023 at Tulane, and he had nice stats, at least from what Brandon's article said, nice stats as far as scoring, defense, and yards per play.
Get a sense of how it matches up with what kind of Oregon is.
Yeah,
and if
that's
there's any.
Yeah, it'd be like influence-wise. Like, would it be like what he did at Tulane drastically different than Oregon? I'm not
Talk for a
sure.
minute. I'm going to see if I can get find some Tulane film from that.
Well,
Yeah, it's actually interesting. It's complete opposite. So when he was at Tulane, they did not blitz much. They played more cover 3. It's more similar to what we were seeing out of SMU than what we're Oregon showing. Oregon's showing a lot of cover 4. They're blitzing a lot. At Tulane, it seemed, if I got the right year, two seasons ago, yeah, they sat in light boxes and
a lot of that's true. That'll be different. Like, who are you going to be? And it'd be funny to see, like, what was Dan Lanning's, what did he run at Memphis versus what he ran at Georgia? Like, when you get access to that elite talent, it's like how much of what you're doing on the G5 level is because you don't have the athletes that you wish you had. To be interested to see what his approach will be when he does have access to, like, I mean, he's going to have access to South Florida and Florida DB.
So here's tight front. I mean, giving you a 5-2 type of look.
Yep, tight front. Yep. Late roll down by the safety. So
you're right, Trey. Unlocking an elite athlete though changes a lot of what you think you can do and what you think you want to do. It will open up a world for your playbook.
Absolutely. And once you have a taste of that, I mean, it's funny because Lanning is the archetype for that. It's like once you have a taste of it, dude, you become incensed on the recruiting trail. And this guy, I mean, being a co-DC of that number one ranked team in the entire country, like that's intoxicating stuff. Now, people would say, why would he leave in Oregon to come to Florida State with the situation? I mean, the same reason why Kenny Dillingham left Florida State to go to Oregon for a year, right? Because he's a co-defensive coordinator under a defensive-minded head coach. You want to show people that you can do it, just like Kenny wanted to show people that he could coordinate an offense without an offensive-minded head coach. So there is legitimate reason. And then, of course, the Lanning connection. We all know what Dan Lanning thinks of Mike Norvell. Like, if they do end up going this route, you can believe that he will be 1,000% vetted and a great hire. So,
so I mean, it's an opportunity to put a stamp on it and take that next step to becoming a head coach at the P2 level. Negatives, doesn't have a ton of experience. There's an unknown there, right? I mean, there's definitely an unknown there.
I mean, one of the criticisms of Adam Fuller was that he wasn't, a Power 5 guy. It's yet to be known how much of coordinating a Power 5 offense he has under his belt. But there's good diversity here. But yeah, I like that he's coached at AAC and now also been part of Oregon. Kind of gotten a feel of, and I like that you can see that he's done 2 different things at the 2 different stops. That tells me that he's going to be malleable, that he's more willing to kind of adjust, or at least he's seen how Lanning has adjusted to having more talent on defense, and been part of an elite squad. So.
It feels like he's on the right trajectory too. Like it's not one of those ones like Adam Fuller. It would have been great if you would have gotten a chance to see Adam Fuller at like Duke, Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, something like that. Like, okay.
Illinois.
Going from Memphis to like that and then to Florida State like that. There feels like a trajectory there that there's a path to taking that next step to the next big thing. Like this feels right for Hampton. Like, okay, you were at Tulane, you had good defenses at Tulane. You go to Oregon, you're under an elite defensive mind. You're a co-DC. You're making, you're learning. You're building your resume. Okay, now Florida State's the next step. Like, and go do that and be great there.
Absolutely, and you get that exposure to what a high-level recruiting operation looks like, which is what people have been clamoring for. I think I'm ready to move on to the next candidate. What about you, Adam?
Let's do it. Yeah, absolutely.
So Kev's gone again. That's okay.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Zack. We're going to talk about Zack Arnett. This one was not on Brendan's list.
It's on Pete Nakos's list from On 3, I believe. He's an analyst at Ole Miss, and of course, he is the former head coach of Mississippi State. Was the defensive coordinator there under my guy and Kevin's guy, Mike Leach. I always thought Mike Leach was a really, one of the most underrated aspects of him was his ability to hire assistant coaches. If you look at his coaching tree, it's absurd. He was a great identifier of talent, and the defense was on the upswing under Leach. So I'd like to we're going to take a look at during his time at Mississippi State, right, Adam?
Correct. Yeah, I just got to get it pulled up here. So he was there 2020 to 2022 as the defensive coordinator. So let me find that.
I believe he might have. Where was he at? Like maybe New Mexico State before that.
So he was at San Diego State.
San Diego State. Okay.
From 2011 to 2019. So he was a GA at San Diego State in 2011 to 2013. 14 to 17, he was a linebackers coach. 18-19, he was DC linebackers coach. So it's interesting. He's got primarily a linebacker background. He played linebacker in New Mexico. That's where you're getting the New Mexico from. He played linebacker in New Mexico from 2005 to 2008. But in his last year as defense coordinator at Mississippi State, he moved over to safeties coach. So he's got a little bit of
multi-positional,
positioning coach, right? So I always like, and another reason I like Hampton, and he might be one of the top names for me right now. I prefer my defensive coordinator to be tied to the secondary. I just think that you think coverage over fronts, and you think about what you need to be. You build your defense back to front. Yep. I prefer that. I think that that's a better way to build a defense. I think that's the way to go about it. Not everybody believes that, but I think that's how the great ones tend to do it. So,
and you've said that consistently. I really like both those things you said. That's something that you've consistently believed, and you made a believer out of me, dude. Let's take a look at what he did at Mississippi State.
What good game. Let's watch him against Ole Miss. Actually, LSU. Let's see what they did against LSU. That's a crazy.
And Kev, we're talking about Arnett. It's a Leach guy.
Oh, Arnett. Yeah.
We're looking at 2022.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more man coverage out of him.
This is the offense. I apologize.
Well, what do you see from the stats the last time he was defensive coordinator, Kev?
Yeah, so he's the kind of guy, he played a lot of man coverage. You see him mixing in some cover 3 and cover 4 pretty equally. Very heavy blitz rate. He's a very, very aggressive defensive coordinator. This says he's not not a big 3-down guy, but I remember a lot of tight front out of him.
So do I, yeah.
First play here against Ole Miss, they're in tight front.
Yeah, they're in tight, which I like to see. I'd like to see FSU move to tight front. I think it's just kind of, it allows you to bring pressures while still being pretty stout against the run and kind of be able to better generate those pressures.
And that type of front and this type of defense was really kind of, I don't know about revolutionized, but I think like really made popular by that guy at Iowa State, right? John Heacock. I feel like he was doing a lot of interesting stuff. And then Clemson went from there. And then you kind of saw it start to see it popping up all over the place. Could be wrong, but.
Yeah. And then Aranda was running it. And then Kirby Smart started throwing it in. And
yep. Here's some even front stuff.
So mix it up. I like to see different fronts. FSU did that better last year. You saw them kind of get more simple this year.
So Arnett's going to bring you SEC experience. I believe he was
head coach.
Decent. Yeah, it's been a head coach experience. So he's going to be a guy that you are going to trust. The defense is yours. I don't need to spend a lot of time over there micromanaging you.
Right.
Obviously put together some good units at Mississippi State. I don't know about his recruiting background. Let me see if I can find his page for 24/7 Sports.
I think he probably beat us for Travion Williams, if I remember that.
Yeah.
But that may be a little bit before his time. I'm not 100% sure.
I don't remember. Right,
yeah, they're kind of sitting in zone here. I think they're probably a little worried about Ole Miss's attack, and they're just kind of hit him with some RPOs.
Yeah, there's not a lot there as far as all-time commits. So recruiting may be a question mark. Obviously, the SEC experience is a big one. I think it's time that they tap into saying, okay, I mean, this is what we want to be. I mean, the Florida, you're literally suing the ACC to get out to go be a part of either the SEC or the Big Ten. It's time to hire that way and to hire guys that have been in those leagues and have that have the understanding of what it takes to compete week in and week out at that level.
Anything else here that kind of jumps off the page? It looks like they're getting stout in the red zone. I don't know, like anything else, like turnover rate with that aggression, Kev, like pretty decent, like turnover rate, like tackles for loss, havoc stuff. What does it look there?
Yeah. So
if we have access to that day. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, make that tackle. Make that tackle. I like that.
They didn't generate a great tackle for loss rate, which is in 2023, which is kind of a bummer because they did blitz a fair amount. But I don't think this was the best example of their defensive unit. Let me go back a year.
23 is going to be a tough one to judge too because of everything that happened.
Obviously,
Leach dying and
the year before, his last year's defensive coordinator, before he's head coach, much higher, 38th in the country in tackle for loss rate. Decent amount of decent explosive rate, 46th. But just really stout against the pass. Just a really good defense from top to bottom.
Showing you some kind of muddle around looks, just kind of guys creeping, going to bring different pressures from different spots.
Yeah, he mixed up his looks pretty well.
This name intrigued me, and that's why I wanted to include him.
Feels like a solid, like to what you guys said, former head coach experience, like competent and solid, right? Like also, this would be a solid hire.
Also, he's an analyst right now. This is a guy who is going to be looking to get back into a defensive coordinating role. You know, he's a year removed from being a head coach, so he went and was an analyst for a year. Mm-hmm. Now you are going to be looking to get back into being a defense coordinator, working your way back up to being a head coach. Obviously, the SEC experience is a huge one for me. I just think that that's important. I really feel like they've got to tap into some of these guys that are competing in these big-time football games and getting guys that have that experience. I think that's really important moving forward for this program.
I think so too. That's a good point.
And as college football has become more pass-focused and pass-oriented, getting a guy that's built a good pass defense in the past, that's also nice to see. It's something you
like the way they tackle. Jeez,
they play physical. I mean,
don't they nasty? Isn't it?
How soft and frustrating has this program been this year? It would be nice to get back to seeing that type of smash mouth. Now, this is one that'll piss some people off. Obviously, seeing guys in bail technique to the field, not uncommon. Most teams are going to be doing that. Giving up a big run though.
Yeah, we know what that looks like. But I'm with you, man. Like seeing physicality out of the secondary in the run game, like I need to see Florida State start delivering some violence again. Yeah. We've been anti-violence for a while. Anything else you want to say before we move on to the next candidate?
No, it's cool though to watch him competing against Lane though. You know what I mean? This is against Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, and obviously Lane's known to be or thought to be an elite offensive mind. So you're in there again, battling in the trenches against elite offensive minds week in and week out. It just
feels right. Yeah.
It does, right? Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It feels right.
More so than I expected. That was a name just because I'm a Leach fanatic. Like I know who Zack Arnett is because when he hired him, like I just love the way he would hire his coordinators, and his defenses were always aggressive, which really matched like his offense. That's an intriguing name. That's one where I have to think about. That's a good question. Are they officially targeting these guys? I'm not 100% sure. We've seen some commonality in like a list that Brendan had out where names that made sense, names with ties to Norvell, names with ties, names that would make sense from a trajectory standpoint. Pete Nakos's list came out with on 3, and a lot of these names were similar, which is interesting to me anytime you see some commonality. As far as I know, I don't know if there's a pecking order. I don't know which of these guys they're targeting, but I would say yes, that these are names that I think you should keep an eye on. What order? Is this the complete comprehensive list? No, it's not. It's too early for that, just to be kind of fair and transparent. But once you start seeing lists come from different people that have some of the same names, there's only one way to think about that. So we'll go from there. The next candidate, Jonathan Patke. He is the Duke defensive coordinator. He was the DC at Texas State in 2023. Duke
This
right
is a
now.
Manny Diaz. This is a Manny Diaz guy.
That is a Manny Diaz guy. Good call.
Yep. This is a guy that's worked underneath Manny Diaz for quite some time.
Yep, at Miami. He also worked at Mississippi State, Louisiana Tech. Duke right now this season, they're top 5 in tackles for loss, top 20 in sacks. He was actually with Manny Diaz at Miami for 6 seasons, which is interesting.
Yeah,
and of course, when you're going to be under Manny Diaz, aggression.
Blitz like hell, right?
And we saw it. We saw what that looks like: aggression, sacks, tackle for loss. I think he was a linebackers guy at Miami, Adam?
So let's see. So on the Duke official site, it lists him. Patke worked for Diaz on 3 previous defensive staffs, most recently at Miami, where Patke served as quality control analyst for 2 seasons before being elevated to linebackers coach for his final
linebackers guy.
So
similar trajectory to kind of Arnett, except you're right now he's working with a defensive-minded head coach. So how much I guess the worry there is how much of the defense is totally his versus what he's doing with Manny.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think that, like we talked about with Hampton, I mean, that's going to be a concern for you, but you spent so much time with this guy at this point,
it's rubbed off. His philosophies have rubbed off by osmosis, right?
Yeah, it really has. It's second nature for you at this point too, because whatever Manny Diaz is doing, you clearly believe in and want to do as well because you spent all this time with him. Mm-hmm. And Manny Diaz is thought to be, he's very highly regarded in the coaching industry as a defensive coach. He's brought this guy with him and traveled around with him and thinks highly enough that I think that speaks some volumes.
I think so too. And he does have DC experience in 2023 at Texas State. That was for that level of football. I think he had some impressive stats. Once again, sacks and tackle for loss. I think that was his specialty at Texas State. But let's take a look at some of that current Duke film. Obviously, Florida State. Yep. I don't know if there's anything that what they did.
This is from 2024. This is from this season. I was able to get some for them from this year. They're going against UConn, so it kind of is what it is.
We'll see what they run. A lot of 4-down looks, right? Like traditional front stuff, right?
4 down, and they're going to bring it. And they're going to bring it all the time. And there's a lot of people out there that probably love that and love the thought of blitzing like crazy every play. And the numbers that Manny Diaz's defenses put up are fun and exciting from a pressure standpoint and creating takeaways. But I don't know. It's not necessarily the style that I like.
Why do you say that?
Because with all that pressure, you're going to get explosive plays. And think about some of the times we've seen Mike Norvell face off against Manny Diaz defenses, and it's been
he's teed off.
It's been a game of explosive plays, and I just think explosives get you beat.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people in the chat saying this is Manny Diaz's defense. I mean, I would agree with that, but I mean, oddly enough, this Texas State defense from 2023 way more closely resembles what Duke is doing today than the Oregon comparison we were making earlier. Texas State and Duke both really high in tackle for loss. Where you're going to get them is, like AB was saying, Texas State was 118th in the country in explosive play rate given up. That's just going to happen when you're that aggressive. You're going to get beaten over the top, and you're hoping that that the negatives that you get out of it make up for it. And I think more often than not it does. I mean, Manny Diaz was at Penn State, and they won a lot of big games there. Were very successful for a pretty long time. So clearly a scheme that can work. But yeah, it is a very, very kind of aggressive look and something that isn't for everybody, and honestly is going to frustrate the fan base pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's the complete opposite of what we do now. It's the exact extreme, and I don't know. And the aggression is interesting. I think it's a nice wrinkle. Obviously, Manny Diaz has had success as a defensive coordinator at a lot of stops, but to me, it's a wrinkle on a more traditional look. When we're talking about like those new tight fronts, like confusing like pre-snap, post-snap stuff, I don't think Duke does a lot of that. They just come in your face.
Yeah,
which
they're
I'm
just going to come
gonna
at you.
pause there for saying that, but yeah, they just all over in your face.
I mean, they're just going to come at you from every angle, and it's
Uh,
going to be constant. It's not going to stop, and that's it's frustrating from an offensive standpoint, as an offensive coordinator or an offensive mind. But at the same point, that at some point you're going to, phrasing. They know at some point they're going to get you, and that. There's a fine line between being aggressive and just being crazy, and I think Manny TS really kind of leans toward the crazy.
And he
side
always has.
Always
To
has.
me, I don't. This wouldn't be. I wouldn't be overly
for me.
jazzed about this one. I don't know about you.
No. Now I will say, we're talking about. I think there's a decent chance that you're going to be looking for a new linebacker coach next year. So he comes in, defense coordinator / linebacker coach, that it fits. This might be one of those ones is like if you miss on a couple guys in front of them, then fall back to this one. This one just doesn't seem to, Mike Norvell hired Adam Fuller for a reason and allowed Adam Fuller to play that too high shell stuff for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like Mike Norvell kind of believes in that style. Now maybe he thought that Adam Fuller was too passive with it and wanted to see more aggression and more takeaways. So he wants to kind of try to get back to the middle. This feels like such a drastic shift from that philosophy. It almost feels like too extreme, like Mike Norvell.
Seismic. And
yeah.
And is there any people talk about this? And I think it's interesting. As an offensive-minded head coach, do you naturally skew towards when you want to make a hire a defense that gives you trouble? I don't know if I would classify a Manny Diaz defense that really gives Mike a lot of trouble from a going against standpoint, right?
Yeah, I think that's a solid point.
All right. Yeah, the first three to me, I'm way more excited than this. This I'd have to convince myself just a little bit, but man, they're up in your grill, brother. That's a fact. The next candidate is interesting because it's another guy who has defensive coordinator and linebacker experience. This is Arkansas defensive coordinator Travis Williams. He has been the defensive coordinator there since 2022. He was a two-time All-SEC linebacker. He was a defensive coordinator at UCF. I think he actually coached Tatum Bethune a little bit. And before that, I believe he was a co-DC at Auburn under Kevin Steele. So this guy has a lot of big-time SEC experience. From the recruiting standpoint, he's basically the reason Tavian Wallace isn't committed to you right now. Like, this guy can recruit. As far as the stats on how the Arkansas defense is done, Kev, do you have anything there, or how are they looking as a unit? I know they started off kind of hot. I'm not really sure what they're looking like now these days.
Yeah, I mean, overall, the defense isn't standing out of the page in terms of yards per play, 91st in the country. I mean, against a fairly tough slate, but you're going to see a lot. It's a heavy quarters team, so you're going to see those two safeties back.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it already. They're going to stick in a light box. So if you pause it here, there's a blocker for every man in the box. I mean, that's a light box. It's more similar to what Fuller was doing, and they're going to give up kind of the shorter plays, just like Fuller. Like, this is kind of that vein of defensive coordinating.
Here's why you hire Travis Williams as your defensive coordinator.
Why is that, big man?
5-star, 4-star, 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 4-star.
He can recruit.
He's an elite recruiter. Always has been and always will be. Proven, very proven. And that's why you go get him. And he's had levels of success as a defense coordinator. I don't think he's the caliber of defense coordinator of some of the guys we may talk about. But he's going to give you some level of competent defense, but he's going to get you, he potentially going to get you such good players that it's going to offset the
maybe some of the scheme. I don't want to say deficiencies, but maybe some of the scheme, the creativity that you saw with some of the earlier names. I don't think you're going to see that. This is more of a solid, traditional unit, and it's going to play more traditional defense, similar to what we did at Florida State, which can be successful if you just pack it in with elite talent. And that 4- and 5-star talent doesn't have to play an SEC schedule every week. It gets to play an ACC schedule. So that helps out as well. Is this from this year, Adam?
Yes, it is.
Okay, what are you looking at?
It's against Oklahoma State. I'm just looking at their structure. So, like Kev talked about, they've got a 2-high structure, so meaning 2 safeties deep. They want to be a quarters team, which is so there's some similarities. You know, when you're talking about building, you know, your defense, or I talked about like Mike, he wanted to, you know, he clearly believed in that 2-high shell. You know, here's an example of one. So just things we're looking at. They're doing a good job of fitting the run here against Ollie Gordon, which you got to do. You know, obviously, so this is against Oklahoma State, obviously a top-notch offensive caliber team in mind. And what's that freaking nutcase's name? I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Mike Gundy?
Yeah,
man on 40? Yeah, dude. Mullet man? Absolutely.
So a guy that's highly regarded as an offensive coach. You know, Arkansas also gave Tennessee a bunch of fits this year.
Yeah, they did.
Another elite offense, and they went and really shut them down. So there's some feathers in the cap here for Williams. And maybe this is a name that needs to be paid more attention to. Fits the structure what Mike seems to like, with 1 high, with some man stuff and quarter stuff. Has put up good defenses against some elite offenses, and an elite recruiter.
Linebacker background, elite recruiter, knows the area really well, and a guy, because he has been at so many like big time programs and like positions of prominence, has a nice he's going to have a nice like coaching resume to kind of fill out to see. We'll see what happens on the defensive side of the ball.
Trey, question for you.
Not as hard as the other ones, maybe just like a dribble or two, but yeah, definitely not at the level of a Patke for sure. Just less aggressive, more sensual, I guess. Yeah, not quite so aggressive that we
Kev's
saw.
the numbers man. He had to step away. I would like to know, like, all right, so we got a little tackle and stunt here. I mean, just think of the difference between what we saw, and we only watched a little bit of Patke's defense.
But they like to let things play out in front of them a little bit.
They're going to want to win with their front 4, which, again, this is something we've talked about with Florida State, and something that really good defenses want to try to do. They want to win with their front, and this is a guy that can get you talent across the front to be able to do that.
Yeah, it looks very similar to what we see at Florida State, just a little bit, with a lot better play on the second and third level. So that's one to keep an eye on. That's interesting. He was a guy that was on.
Maybe that makes some people mad. Maybe that makes some people happy. But again, we're not seeing a lot of movement on the front. They're lining up. They're static, meaning they're not. You know, we talked about not Hampton, but Sugar. One of the first ones we did. Simmons. They were moving the front around. So there's a lot of variations in looks here that guys we're talking about.
Yeah, this is interesting, dude. It really is, like, all shades, like different fronts, different methodologies, different levels of aggression. Like it's going to be interesting to see which way Mike chooses to go. But this one, like you said, if you're zeroing in on something, look at his coaching resume and look at those all-time recruits that are linked to him. This is interesting. More of a traditional one, but I'd be much more excited about this hire than the previous one. Moving on, let's go to Greg Gasparato. He is I don't know if I want to spend a whole bunch of time on this one. This guy was on Brendan's list. I think if you start to get down to this level from the names that we spoke about, I might start to be getting a little bit worried. Hopefully I'm not disparaging Greg Gasparato, Tulane's defensive coordinator, too much.
Yeah. Let's with Kev having to step away here, maybe let's put a pause, put a pin in this one. We're at about 50 minutes. We've gotten through Got through how many names? One,
Did
two,
you
three,
want to?
four,
Did you want to? Yeah, we gotten through I think 4 or 5.
we've
Did you
got-
want
yeah,
to?
we
Did
got
you want to
five.
talk about though Chris's suggestion during his pod? Did you want to?
Yeah,
get
Tom
to him?
Allen. I mean,
That was an interesting one that came
yeah,
out. That wasn't on
that one
either
blew me away
list.
completely.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't on any list. Tom Allen's the former Indiana head coach, was at USF.
A current Penn State defensive coordinator. They're having a lot of success.
And Chris, I don't know, Chris kind of just dropped that name in there out of the blue.
They seem like they're bros. They're
on the
buddies.
most recent OTB. I don't know. Is there a bromance there between Chris and Tom Allen? I'm gonna have to find this. I'm gonna need to do a little investigating on this.
I think so. I think the people would like to know.
Yeah, but anyway, I mean, you start talking about Tom Allen, who is, I mean, you just think about that Penn State defense this year, and then just historically, he's fielded really good defenses as when he was at Indiana and at USF.
Had success at Indiana too. Obviously, that's where Michael Penix went before he went to Washington under Tom Allen. Like a guy that, for that level of recruit, there were some guys that were tied to Florida State back in the Willie days that ended up going, I believe, a linebacker, Michael Penix, that went to Indiana. So a good recruiter for his level, really personable guy.
He was all right. So he's at Penn State now. He was in Indiana from 2017 to 2023. He was at South Florida for 1 year in 2015. Ole Miss before that for 2 years. Arkansas State. I mean, he's older.
He's different than some of the first people we talked about as far as where he's at in his career.
Right. Yeah, he's much different in that regard. And so he's an older, more experienced coach, which brings a head coaching background. You start talking about Mike wants that side of the ball to be its own entity. Mike wants to be spending time with the offense. We'll see if he gives up play calling or not. We'll talk about that stuff on another show. But Tom Allen is one that starts making a lot of sense. You start thinking about, would he leave Penn State to go to Florida State? Does that make a lot of sense for his career?
He's got a lot of ties to the state of Florida, so that is something. Right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So Chris mentioned that this is a guy who considers Florida to be a second home for him. I believe he's from Indiana originally, but considers Florida being a second home. Older guy too, in his 50s, so maybe wants to be in the warm weather more than the cold weather all the time. I don't know. I'm not even going to pull the film up because I don't want to get myself overly excited. But that was one. We'll talk about it with the offensive coordinator names here, and whenever we get to those. But you start looking at Dan Mullen as as a potential offensive coordinator. Tom Allen is of that regard, for me anyway, at least with these defense coordinator names.
Out of the ones, so would he be the one as far as like the guy? I don't know if we want to put our flag in the ground and say that's my guy, but would he be the one? Like, would that be the one you're leaning towards?
Playing the flag, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the Hampton thing, to me, I'm really excited about that. Just like you said, man, that trajectory feels right. There's just so many things in his favor that I think the potential risk of him not being a full-fledged defensive coordinator at the Power 5 level for so long, it doesn't bother me just with all the upside. And I'd rather, when you're facing the kind of hole that Mike's in right now, you need to bet on upside to help him climb out of it. Like, you got to be a little bit aggressive.
I get this concern about 50-year-olds connecting with kids easily these days.
Chris said that something about his and this is all from his personal knowledge, and what he's done in the past as a recruiter at Indiana, not a pretty hard place to get kids to come and play for. Right. Chris said that he doesn't foresee that to be an issue, and if anybody knows recruiting at Florida State, it's Chris Nee.
Right. Yeah. So I take Chris at his word on that kind of stuff. He's clearly knows this situation, or knows Tom Allen well enough to be able to judge that, or he wouldn't have given his opinion on it. And he's been a head coach, and he was successful there for some time in a not easy in a not great situation. Obviously, having great success at Penn State this year. I just don't worry about it. I'm not concerned about it. I think that's one of those things that's going to work itself out just fine in the end.
I think so. Speaking of working itself fine out in the end, I think that is the end of this episode. Kev, do you want to, before we head out, do you want to give any final thoughts? Do you have a guy? Do you have a favored candidate?
No, I think I'd like to see. I think I'd like to see someone who mixes in tight front. And I think another thing I'd like to see is instead of an up and comer, I would like to see someone who's been a head coach before, someone who can kind of help stabilize, help be a head coach for the other side of the ball, stabilize it, to kind of get those guys in line. So I think I personally, for the defensive coordinator position, would be looking more for these kind of older, experienced guys, sacrificing maybe some of the enthusiasm on the recruiting trail. But to me, a Tom Allen immediately stands out as kind of an intriguing name, someone who we really didn't talk about, but like maybe a Muschamp or someone in that vein. That's who knows, maybe Aranda is kind of no longer retained at Baylor, and that's a name you can go after. But I do think someone who's kind of had to be a big time head coach before and kind of sees the recruiting picture from that angle for the defensive side of the ball is kind of what I'm looking for personally. But these young guys are exciting, and that they bring in more schematic interest and more recruiting chops. So I'm not opposed to really any of the names on the list. I just think I personally would prefer a little bit of a stabilizing force after kind of what happened this season.
Guy Purdue's not getting canned anytime soon, is he? Was that the old Illinois defensive coordinator?
Yeah,
that'd be interesting. No, but those are names. This is always fluid. Like I said, it's just a first list.
Board season, baby. Let's go.
Can't wait. We'll be back next week. We're going to talk offensive coordinators, wide receiver coaches. Luckily, as the week develops, maybe names will pop on the board. Maybe names will fall off the board. And if there's any names you specifically want us to talk about for that next video, go ahead and participate in the comments. Like we said, guys, we love you. This season has been long. This season has been terrible. This season has sucked. This is kind of fun to talk about. So right now we get to talk about some fun stuff. So just enjoy it while you can, because the team has to go back out on the field in a week or two. So just soak it in while you can, guys. We love you. Thank you for chopping. Never stop chopping. Keep chopping.
Chop, chop, chippity, chop, chop.